We've had the same 4th of July cookout in this backyard for 18 years. Same neighbors, same cousins, same relatives who drive 2 hours for my mom's potato salad and then complain about the drive the whole time they're eating it. My dad runs it the same way every single year. He's at the grill by 4, he shakes every hand that walks through the gate, he makes rounds with the drinks like it's his personal mission that nobody's cup goes empty. It's the kind of tradition that feels permanent, like it couldn't change even if you wanted it to. This past July, I was helping carry food out from the kitchen when I noticed a man I didn't recognize sitting at the far end of the picnic table. 60s, maybe? Gray-haired, wearing a denim shirt that had been washed so many times it had gone soft-looking. He had a plate in front of him, mostly eaten, and he was just sitting there quietly watching the yard the way older people do at parties, taking it all in without needing to be part of the noise. I figured he was somebody's plus one, a neighbor's friend, the kind of person who shows up at a big cookout and slots in without anyone noticing exactly when they arrived. What made me look twice was my dad. He came around the table doing his usual rounds, drink in hand, working his way from person to person, and he walked right past this man. Didn't nod, didn't pause, didn't do the handshake thing he does with literally every person in that yard. Just walked past him like the seat was empty. I went to my mom at the grill and asked her quietly who he was. She looked over, frowned a little, and said she thought he was one of Dad's work friends. I went to my dad. He said he thought the man was one of Mom's cousins from her side. I asked my cousin Mark, who's been coming to this cookout since before he could walk, and Mark just looked at the man and shook his head. Nobody had invited him. Nobody had seen him arrive. Mark, who has never once in his life walked away from a situation he could walk toward instead, went straight over and asked him directly who he was. The man looked up, chewed, swallowed, took his time about it, and said that he'd been coming to this cookout for 15 years. Mark laughed and said that wasn't possible, that he'd been coming here his whole life and had never seen this man once. The man didn't argue. He just picked up his fork and said, calm as anything, that Mark had been small then, that none of us would remember. By this point, a small crowd had formed. Me, Mark, my dad, a couple of the neighbors. My dad stepped forward and said, politely but firmly, that he'd never seen this man before and that he thought there'd been a mistake, maybe the wrong address. The man set his fork down, wiped his mouth carefully with a napkin, looked up at my dad and said, your father used to host this cookout. He invited me every year. I never missed one. My dad's father died in 1986. My dad was 19. The house we're standing in didn't exist yet. My parents didn't buy it until I was 5. There is no version of reality where this man attended a cookout at this address hosted by my grandfather. My dad said that quietly. Said his father had been dead for decades. Said there was no way. The man nodded like he already knew. Said, I know. I was there when he passed. Then he stood up, carried his empty plate to the trash can by the gate, and without looking back at any of us, walked out through the gate and down the street. I followed him. I got to the sidewalk maybe 10 seconds after he went through the gate. The street was empty. Empty like he'd turned a corner. Empty like he'd simply stopped existing somewhere between the gate and the pavement. A straight road, late afternoon light, nothing moving in either direction. We checked the security footage that night. The camera above the back door covers the whole yard. Every person who came through that gate shows up on it. We scrubbed through hours of footage, found every cousin, every neighbor, every kid who ran through 6 times. The seat at the end of the table where that man sat and ate half a plate of food shows up in every frame as empty. No plate, no person. Just an empty bench in the middle of a crowded party. My dad didn't say much after that. He went quiet in a way I hadn't seen from him before, something behind his eyes that he wasn't putting into words. About a week later, I was in the attic looking for something else entirely when I found a box I'd never gone through. Old photos, some papers, things that belonged to my grandfather. At the bottom, under everything else, was a folded piece of paper. A list of names, written in handwriting I recognized from old birthday cards my mom had kept. At the top, it said every year, and below were names and dates going back decades. Some I recognized, some I didn't. and at the very bottom, in my grandfather's handwriting, a single line that had no name attached to it. "If I'm not there, someone will be. Tell him to keep coming." I put the paper back. I didn't show my dad. I don't know what I would have said. My parents left for the fireworks around 8:30. I was 17. They trusted me home alone. It wasn't a big deal. They do it all the time and nothing ever happens. Lock the doors, don't open for strangers, call if anything's wrong. I said sure, settled on the couch, turned on a movie. Normal July 4th for me, honestly. I don't even like fireworks that much. The noise bothers me, so staying in while everyone else drove out to the park was genuinely fine. It was maybe 9:45 when I heard the knocking. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, not urgent, the kind of knock that sounds patient rather than rushed. I muted the TV and went to the door, looked through the peephole. A group of kids on my front porch, 5 of them, maybe my age, holding sparklers, all of them looking at the door with these wide, easy smiles like they'd been expecting me. I didn't know a single face, not from school, not from the neighborhood, not from anywhere. And they were just standing there, close together, sparklers leaving trails in the dark behind them, smiling at a door that hadn't opened yet. I didn't open it. I stayed at the peephole, watching them. One of them waved slowly at the door, which already felt wrong because there was no way to see me through it from the outside. Another one leaned over to say something to the one next to them, and they both laughed quietly, like they were sharing a joke they'd had for a while. Then I saw the jacket. The kid in the middle, dark-haired, standing slightly ahead of the others. He was wearing a blue and white windbreaker that I knew. I'd bought it 2 years before, wore it constantly, lost it at the park 3 weeks earlier. I'd looked everywhere for it, checked lost and found twice, eventually gave up and assumed someone had grabbed it by mistake. And here it was on this kid I'd never seen before in my life, on my porch on a holiday night, being worn by someone who was smiling at my door like I'd invited them. He was looking directly at the people, not at the door in general, not at the porch light, at the peephole specifically, like he knew exactly where my eye was. I called my dad in a low voice, stepping away from the door but keeping it in my peripheral. Told him what was happening, described the kids, told him about the jacket. He said, "Call the police right now, we're coming home." I called 911, stayed on with the dispatcher, kept my voice down. She told me to stay inside, not to open the door, that she had someone on the way. I went back to the peephole. The porch was empty. No kids, no sparklers, no trails of light. Just the empty porch and the street beyond it, and the distant sound of fireworks somewhere across town. I stood there for a long time after that, just listening, waiting for another knock that didn't come. Police checked the yard, the surrounding street, the whole block. Nothing. My parents got home 20 minutes later and we went through the house together, even though no one had come inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. I didn't sleep much. In the morning, I went out to get the paper and found it on the doorknob. The blue and white windbreaker, folded neatly, like someone had taken time to do it right. Clean, like it had been through a wash. I checked the pockets before I let myself think too hard about it. Empty, except for a small folded piece of paper in the front pocket, handwriting careful and even. "We'll keep it safe for you. See you next year." I still have the jacket. It's in the back of my closet, and I haven't touched it since that morning. Next July, I'm going to hear 3 knocks on my door, and I'm going to look through the peephole and see them standing there. I already know it. I just don't know yet whether I'm going to open the door or not. I think about that more than anything else from that night. Not who they were or where they came from, but what happens if next year I actually do. Lily turned 6 in April, and she'd been talking about the 4th of July parade since basically the day after her birthday. She loves everything about it. The flags, the bands, the fire trucks, the way everyone lines up on the curb and cheers like the people walking past are doing something genuinely extraordinary. I love watching her watch it more than I actually love the parade itself. She holds my hand so tight the whole time, jumping slightly every time a drum hits, waving at every float like each one is waving back specifically at her. We got there early this year, found a good spot near the front, close enough that she could see everything without me having to hold her up. It was hot, packed, noisy in that particular July way. Smell of sunscreen and someone nearby grilling. Kids everywhere, people in lawn chairs behind us who'd clearly been there since morning. Normal, perfect even. About halfway through, my water bottle slipped. I reached down to grab it off the pavement, 1 second, 2 at the most, and when I straightened up and looked to my left, Lily wasn't there. The specific kind of panic that hits when you lose sight of your child in a crowd is something I can't describe to you if you haven't felt it. It's not like regular fear. It's total. It's instant. It shuts everything else down. I started moving and calling her name at the same time, pushing through people, scanning at knee height, because that's where a 6-year-old is in a crowd like that. I saw her maybe 30 feet away, near the entrance to a side street that branched off from the parade route. She was walking slowly, not running, holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. The woman was wearing a light blue dress, pale, somewhere between 40 and 60, smiling down at Lily the way you smile at a child you genuinely find delightful. They looked, from a distance, like a grandmother and granddaughter taking a leisurely walk, like they belonged together. I ran. I grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her back against me, and I looked at this woman and asked what was happening, where they were going. The woman didn't startle, didn't look guilty or caught or surprised. She just smiled at me the same way she'd been smiling at Lily and said she was so glad she got to see her this year. I asked if I knew her. She shook her head and said no, but that she remembered Lily from last year. We weren't at this parade last year. We were in a completely different town, 4 hours away, visiting my sister. There is no version of last year where this woman saw my daughter at a parade. I picked Lily up and walked back into the crowd without another word. I didn't look back. I held her the rest of the parade and most of the way home. And she was quiet in a way that wasn't her normal quiet. Not tired, not bored, just somewhere else in her head. At bedtime, I sat on the edge of her bed and asked her gently about the woman, who she was, what she'd said. Lily was quiet for a long time, picking at the edge of her blanket, and then she said the woman had told her she was supposed to be in her parade, that when she was older she'd have a special place in it, that she'd come get her when the time was right. I kept my voice even. I told her it was just a strange lady, that she didn't have to be scared, that she was safe. Lily nodded, but her eyes didn't change. Kids know when you're saying something because it's true, and when you're saying it because you need them to believe it. I reported it the next morning, described the woman in as much detail as I could, the dress, the hair, the age, everything. Police reviewed parade footage, checked every camera angle that covered that side street entrance. They called me back 3 days later and told me they hadn't found anyone matching the description in any of the footage. Not walking near Lily, not standing nearby, not anywhere in the surrounding area at the relevant time. They said it was possible she'd just been outside the camera range, that it wasn't necessarily anything more than an odd interaction with a stranger. I didn't push it. What was I going to say? She wasn't on camera, so maybe she wasn't real? They'd have referred me somewhere. What I know is what Lily told me, and what Lily told me was said in the flat, certain way that young children say things they believe completely, without drama, without exaggeration, the way they say it's raining or I'm hungry. She wasn't scared when she said it. She was just reporting what she'd been told. She'll come get me when I'm older. Next year, Lily will be 7. The parade route is already announced. I don't know how to protect my daughter from something that didn't show up on any camera at a crowded public event in the middle of the day. But I know I will be there, and I know I will not let go of her hand. Not for a second. Not for anything. I've lived in my apartment building for 4 years, and the one thing that makes it genuinely worth it, the one thing I'd miss if I moved, is the rooftop deck. It's small, nothing fancy, just enough room for a couple of chairs and a cooler, but the view of the sky is unobstructed enough that on the 4th of July you can see the town fireworks display perfectly without fighting for a spot in the park with 10,000 other people. My neighbor Carla have the deck next to mine, and we'd done it together the last 3 years running, splitting snacks, watching the show, calling it a night around 10. Simple tradition, easy night. This year, Carla was out of town visiting family, so it was just me, one chair, one beer, watching the sky go dark over the rooftops and waiting for the first burst. I wasn't bothered by being alone up there. If anything, it was peaceful. No crowds, no traffic noise, just the city settling into the holiday evening, the smell of someone grilling somewhere below, a warm night with barely any wind. I'd been up there maybe 20 minutes when I noticed the figure on the roof across the street. It wasn't immediately alarming. People go on their roofs on the 4th. It's a good viewing spot if you live in that kind of neighborhood, and that particular building had a flat roof that would have been easy enough to access. The figure was standing near the far edge of the roofline, tall, still, facing my direction, far enough away that I couldn't make out a face or clothing details, just a silhouette against the darkening sky. I lifted my hand and waved, the casual kind, 2 fingers, the way you acknowledge a neighbor you don't know well enough to shout across to. The figure waved back. Same hand, same timing, unhurried, 2 fingers, exactly mirroring what I'd just done. I told myself it was coincidence that they'd happened to wave at the same moment, that from that distance they probably couldn't even tell I'd waved first. I shifted in my chair, turned slightly to check the street below, looked back. The figure hadn't moved. Still facing me, still at the same spot on the roofline. I waved again, slower this time, a deliberate full hand wave, watching carefully. The figure raised his hand and waved back in the exact same motion. Not approximately the same, exact. The same arc, the same speed, the same drop at the end. I sat there for a second just processing that, telling myself there was some obvious explanation I was missing, that I was reading too much into it because I was alone and the night had gotten darker than I'd noticed. The fireworks started. The first burst went up red and gold, and in that half second of light I could see across the street clearly. A man, pale-faced, dark clothing, one hand still slightly raised from the last wave, his face turned towards me rather than towards the sky where everyone else's face was pointed. Everyone watches the fireworks. You don't stand on a roof on the 4th and stare across the street at a neighbor while a show is happening above you. You just don't. I stopped waving. I stayed still. Told myself I'd just watch the show and ignore him, that he was probably some strange but harmless guy who thought he was being funny. But I couldn't stop glancing over. Every time I looked, same position, same stillness, same fixed attention on my side of the street rather than the sky. The show runs about 25 minutes. I watched maybe 10 of them actually, the rest of the time split between the fireworks and that roof line across the street, feeling the specific discomfort of being watched by something that won't look back when you look back. By the end of it, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. I packed up my chair, grabbed my empty bottle, headed for the door back inside. I looked one more time across the street. Couldn't help it. He'd moved. He was now at the near edge of the roofline, the side closest to my building, maybe half the distance from where he'd been standing the whole night. Close enough that when he moved to that edge and pointed across at me, he would have been able to see my face clearly. And as I stood there with my hand on the door, he raised his arm slowly, not in a wave this time, and pointed directly at me, finger extended, held there steady like he wanted me to understand it wasn't an accident, wasn't ambiguous, was specifically and only meant for me. I went inside, locked the door, closed every blind on the street-facing side, and didn't open them again that night. I sat in my kitchen with the overhead light on and tried to read something on my phone until my heart rate came down, which took longer than I'd like to admit. In the morning, I looked out carefully from the edge of the window. The roof across the street was empty, the way roofs look when nobody's been on them in a while, A couple of dead leaves near the edge, an old vent pipe, nothing else. I went down to street level later and walked over, looked up at the roof line from a sidewalk. Nothing. I knocked on the building's front door and asked the man who answered if anyone in the building was on the roof last night. He frowned and said nobody had been up there in years, said the access door had been painted over sometime in the renovation and didn't open anymore. That, as for his knowledge, it was sealed. I thanked him and left. I didn't explain why I was asking. I walked back to my building and stood on the sidewalk between the two roofs for a moment, looking back and forth, trying to work out the geometry of it. Where he'd been standing, how close the near edge actually was. Close. Closer than it had looked from my deck. Close enough that when he moved to that edge and pointed across at me, he would have been able to see my face clearly. I go up to the deck still. I'm not going to let one weird night take that from me. But I don't wave at the roof across the street anymore. Not at anything. Not even casually. And I always, without exception, go inside before the fireworks end. I don't want to be the last one standing out there when everything goes dark and quiet again. I work in a coffee shop, which means holidays aren't holidays for me. They're just days when everyone else is off and I'm not. 4th of July fell on a Thursday this year, and I had a 5 a.m. opening shift the next morning, which meant I needed to be asleep by 10, which meant no fireworks, no staying up late, no anything except an early night in my apartment alone, while the rest of the neighborhood celebrated outside my window. I live on the second floor of an older building, the kind with high ceilings and radiators that make noise in winter, and a basement that's been locked and off limits the entire time I've lived there. The landlord told me when I moved in it was a liability thing. Old flood damage, structural issues with some of the support, pipes that were grandfathered into a code that no longer existed and couldn't be updated without essentially rebuilding the floor. He said the utility connections down there had been disconnected and the door padlocked from the outside, and that nobody should be going near it. I'd walked past that basement door in the ground floor hallway hundreds of times without thinking twice about it. I was in bed around 10:15, windows cracked slightly despite the fireworks noise because it was too warm to close them fully. Somewhere between awake and asleep when I heard it start. Banging. From below. Not from the street, not from a neighbor's unit, from underneath me, from the floor, conducted up through the building in a way that I could feel faintly in the mattress if I held still. 3 hits, a pause, 3 hits, a pause. Steady and even, like someone working through a pattern rather than just making noise, like a signal. I sat up and listened. The fireworks outside were still going, that overlapping boom and crackle that makes it hard to isolate individual sounds. But this was different. Lower, more percussive, cutting through the outdoor noise rather than mixing with it. I got up and walked to the hallway, and standing there in the quiet of the building's interior, the sound was clearer and obviously coming from below, from the basement. I called the landlord. He picked up sounding annoyed, said it was pipes, said old buildings make noise, said to go back to sleep. I told him it was rhythmic, that pipes don't bang in threes with pauses, and he said again that it was nothing and hung up. I stood there in the hallway for a few minutes just listening to it continue. 3, pause, 3, pause. Absolutely consistent, not varying by a single beat. And then I went downstairs to the ground floor. The basement door was at the end of the short hallway near the back entrance. The padlock was there, latched exactly as it always was. But the sound was right behind it, close, like whatever was making it was standing just on the other side of that door. I stood there, and the banging stopped. Just stopped, mid-sequence, like whatever was making it knew I was there. The silence after it felt different from the silence before, thicker somehow, like the difference between an empty room and a room with someone holding their breath in it. I lay there in the dark and did not move, and did not answer, because whatever is down there, it's been waiting long enough that I don't think answering is something I'm willing to do. Not scared. Not desperate, almost conversational, the way you might ask someone what time it is. Patient, like whoever it belonged to had been waiting a long time and was simply checking in. I didn't answer. I called 911 from the hallway, told them I could hear someone in a sealed basement, gave the address. 2 officers arrived within 15 minutes and broke the padlock. I stayed at the top of the basement stairs while they went down with flashlights. I could hear them moving around down there, their voices calling clear as they checked each section. They came back up and said it was empty. No person, no squatter, no equipment that could have been making that sound. But on the wall near the bottom of the stairs, they'd found a calendar, old and water-stained. Each year's July 4th circled in red going back decades, layer after layer of the same date marked on annual pages that had been torn out and pinned there one by one. And below the calendar, written in letters that were careful and deliberate and had clearly taken time, "One day, someone will let me out." The officers said it was probably kids at some point, said they'd do a follow-up, left a report number. The landlord came the next morning, put a new padlock on it, didn't meet my eyes the entire time he was there, and was gone in under 10 minutes without explaining anything. That night, a little after midnight, it started again. 3 hits, a pause, 3 hits, a pause. Exactly the same rhythm as the night before, like nothing had changed, like the broken padlock and the police and the daylight between then and now hadn't happened at all. And then, the voice, same flat, patient tone, same words. "Is it the 4th yet?" I turned every light in the apartment on and sat on the couch until morning. The banging stopped sometime before dawn, the exact minute I couldn't tell you because I'd stopped watching the clock by then. The landlord is selling the building. He told me last week, said he'd decided it was time, offered existing tenants first right of refusal. He said it like a practical decision, a normal thing. Looked somewhere past my shoulder the whole time he said it. I didn't ask him about the basement. He didn't bring it up either. I'm moving out at the end of the month regardless. I already signed somewhere else. What I haven't told the landlord, what I haven't told anyone, is that the banging didn't stay in the basement. 2 nights ago, in the dead quiet of 3 a.m., I heard it from inside the wall behind my bed. 3 hits, a pause. 3 hits, a pause. And I lay there in the dark and did not move and did not answer because whatever is down there, it's been waiting long enough that I don't think answering is something I'm willing to do. Six of us rented the cabin for the long weekend. Late 20s, all overdue for a real break from the city. The kind of trip you plan in a group chat for 3 months and then nearly cancel twice before someone finally just books it. Deep woods, a lake out front, no neighbors visible in any direction. A fire pit that looked like it had been used hard over many summers. Exactly what we needed. We got there Friday afternoon, unloaded everything, claimed beds, started the grill before we'd even fully unpacked. The garage attached to the side of the cabin we just kind of ignored. It wasn't in the rental listing photos. The door was stiff and clearly hadn't been opened in a while, and we had no reason to go in there. We had everything we needed. It was late that first night, fire dying down, most of a case of beer gone between 6 people, when somebody brought it up. Ryan, because it was always going to be Ryan, said he'd peeked in the garage window earlier and seen something that looked like an old cooler in there and thought we should check if there was anything in it. We all knew there wouldn't be anything useful in it. We went and opened the garage anyway because that's what you do at a cabin at midnight when the drinks are running low and you're bored enough to find a stiff door interesting. The cooler was red, or had been once. More rust orange now. Battered, the kind of thing that had been sitting in that garage since long before the current owners had bought the property. The metal latch was seized, and we had to work at it with a flathead screwdriver for a few minutes before it gave. Inside was one thing. A single metal cylinder, maybe 8 inches long, rested along the seam, a hand-painted label in faded black. July 4, 1976. Old enough that none of us immediately recognized what it was. Ryan picked it up, turned it over, said it felt heavy for its size. No fuse, no launch mechanism we could identify, nothing that looked like any firework any of us had seen before, which made sense. It was 50 years old. We laughed about it, took some photos, put it in the trash bag by the garage door, and forgot about it. Around 1 a.m., A sound woke most of us up. A single explosion, loud and clean, directly above the cabin. The kind of sound you feel in your chest before you hear it. We stumbled outside half asleep, expecting to see something in the sky. There was nothing. Just the dark tree line and the stars and the lake reflecting them back, completely still. We went back inside. The cylinder was on the coffee table. Nobody said anything for a moment. We all looked at it, and then at each other, and then at the trash bag by the door, which was still tied, still sitting exactly where we'd left it. Ryan walked over and looked inside the bag. Empty. He looked back at the cylinder on the table, like it might explain itself. We didn't sleep much the rest of that night. In the morning, we decided to get rid of it properly. Two of us took it down to the lake and threw it as far out as either of us could manage, watched it hit the water and sink, stood there until there were no more ripples. Went back to the cabin, spent the day doing normal things, swimming, hiking the trail behind the property, trying to pretend the night before hadn't happened. That evening around midnight, the explosion again. Same sound, same position directly above, one clean burst with no light to show for it. We went outside. The lake was flat and dark and silent. The cylinder was on the kitchen counter. Dry. Warm when Ryan touched it, which he immediately regretted touching and said so. After that, we tried everything methodically, the way you do when you're scared but don't want to say you're scared. We buried it at the edge of the tree line, marked the spot. It was back inside by morning. We drove it 2 miles down the road and left it on the gravel shoulder and watched it in the rearview mirror as we drove away. It was in the cup holder when we parked back at the cabin, and nobody had a version of events that explained how it got there. We locked it in the trunk overnight. In the morning, the trunk was fine, and the cylinder was on the front seat. On the last night, we built the fire up high and put the cylinder directly in the center of it. Stacked wood on top, let it go for a long time. The fire was the hottest we'd made it all weekend. We stood back and watched and waited, and for a few minutes, the tension in the group actually started to loosen up a little. That specific relief of finally doing something decisive. Then, the fire went out. All at once. No wind, no reason, just out. The cylinder was sitting in the middle of the cold ash, unmarked, not even warm this time when someone checked. And from the trees at the edge of the firelight, a woman's voice, clear and close, "Happy 4th." We all looked at exactly the same time toward the tree line. Nothing. Just the dark and the sound of the forest. No follow-up, no footsteps, nothing. We went inside and locked the door and didn't go back out. We left early the next morning without eating breakfast and without talking much. I packed my bag fast, carried it to the car, and we were on the road before 8. I found it when I unpacked it home, sitting at the bottom of my duffel bag between a rolled-up pair of jeans and my toiletries kit, like it had been placed carefully by someone who didn't want it to shift around in transit. Warm again. I put it in a box in the back of my closet. I don't know what else to do with it. I've thought about it every day since we got back, specifically about the voice in the trees. 1 sentence, 4 words, gone before any of us could place where it was coming from. Late at night, sometimes I can still hear it, low and clear, patient, like the dark patient. Happy 4th. Like it's been saying it every year for a long time, to whoever happens to be standing close about to hear.